Welcome to the Just Build Wealth podcast. I'm Ryan Ross.
And I'm Mike Ross.
The Just Build Wealth podcast is focused on simplifying wealth building. If you're trying to understand the strategies, systems, and processes that go into building companies, assets, and wealth, you're in the right place. With each guest, we aim to dig into their business and the industry they work in to gain a better understanding of how they are building wealth for themselves and helping others do so. In this episode of Just Build Wealth, we spoke with Laurie Nichols, and she is a succession and transition coach for independent wealth managers and professional service firms. We begin discussion with how she got into the wealth management industry. Before that, she was a CPA, and we go into detail regarding how that transaction worked. Then we talk about the key value propositions RIAs have and how they continue those into their next iteration of a company. We discuss how to encourage talent within your firm and how to properly frame your business to potential buyers for your company if your succession plan includes an external sale. We talk about having courageous conversations and creating a self-inventory when identifying successors, which might not be just one person, and why they are critical to creating a good succession plan. Then we talk about how to jumpstart succession planning in general and how to find Laurie if the timing is right to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laurie Nichols. Laurie Nichols, welcome to the show. Give us a 30-sec introduction about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am a succession and transition coach for independent wealth managers and I would just say professional service firms in that financial industry realm. And I'm on the people side of that whole process, as opposed to the legal financial elements of that. And I would say it's probably the most important part of that process of succession planning and successful exits for business owners.
Yeah, interesting. And I was doing some research. It said you started as a CPA. And I'm curious, how did you live in the money management world now? How did you start as a CPA and how did that transition work for yourself?
Well, so I always like to say that I am a recovering CPA. And so, but I got into the business because I was doing internal audit work for a big bank here in the Pacific Northwest. And they started an RIA that was a wholly owned subsidiary. It had the opportunity to go in there as kind of the operations person, and became the chief compliance officer. Fun. And eventually becoming a partner in that company. And we did a management buyout from what was eventually Bank of America quite a few years later. But it all started with that kind of foundation of being a CPA and understanding how operations work.
Okay. And that transaction, it sounds like, with Bank of America, is that when M&A entered the picture?
Yes, so that was my first experience with it. And we became an independent RIA at that point. And had to, having been a part of a large bank and a subsidiary, it was like, okay, not only could we buy Post-its of any size and any color that we desired, we actually had to take on all the things that RAs have to take on in terms of running the business, but then growing the business without that kind of natural referral base that we'd previously had. So we successfully ran that for more than 20 years, and we're, I like to say now, blessed to have that opportunity to sell to a larger firm and exit. And that's what kind of teed up my opportunity for this next chapter career, doing work that really feels good and I think helps a lot of people.
Yeah, I want to go there, but first I'm curious about how those types of transactions work, or how do this between absorbing an RIA or becoming one. How do those like operationally work?
Well, for us, it was really extricating yourself from a technology perspective and making sure that you've got everything ready to go in terms of the technology platform. And I don't want to date myself, but nowadays there are a lot of companies out there and specialists that can help firms prepare for in advance of them actually being independent, to have all of that stuff ready to go. And I'm talking about operational, um, oh gosh, like the technology for portfolio management, for client management, just all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people out there that can help with that now, as can custodians. But at that time, we really had to figure a lot of that out ourselves. We had the benefit of time because we knew we were navigating this transition, and so we could get a lot of that stuff teed up. But depending on where somebody's exiting from, where things have to be extremely confidential and they're not really shared, it's probably a little trickier. Mm-hmm. But with my clients now, I don't get too involved in that. I'm more helping to ensure that the people are ready as people for that change that's going to cause, I'll just put it this way, emotional ripples, if not tsunamis in some cases, that don't have to be as inevitable as they sometimes seem to be.
So Laurie, one of the things that as the years go by, I am constantly aware of is that I have blind spots. And actually that kind of becomes something that I'm always telling my staff to say, make sure you're looking at my blind spots. So one of them, I think you may have a perspective on. I believe that the two key pieces to any financial advisor, but certainly in the RIA world and the registered investment advisor world's value proposition, the two key pieces are financial planning and asset management. I'd love your perspective on that. What am I missing? Are there blind spots in my kind of assumptions there?
I would say those are key value propositions. It's more of a yes and response. What I so often see, it's kind of like if the business is like a three-legged stool, you've got those elements, very client oriented, it's about the client service. But the third leg of the stool is, what are we doing to develop our people? And by develop, that can mean any number of things. I'm really thinking about, as a business owner, how are you ensuring that you've got the culture that both retains those that you want to retain, and nowadays also is attractive to those that you may need to attract in the future. And it's kind of like most RIAs are moving at warp speed 99.9% of the time. And there's that almost like that singular focus on keeping and getting clients. And it's important. If you don't have the clients, you don't have the revenues. That's how we all get paid, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, without there being that intentional effort to say, what are we doing internally to ensure that we really have our, my tagline is succession planning with heart, because I see things through that lens of what matters to people, that we've got our arms around those key people that are really the lifeblood of the business. So back in the day in the institutional investment side of the business, there used to be that expression that your most of your assets are on two legs. I think it's true for an RIA or a wealth management firm as well. Absolutely, clients need to be taken care of. Absolutely, we need to have a good financial planning approach. Absolutely, we need to have good investment returns. But to some degree, those are table stakes. And if we're not really thinking in terms of how do we ensure we've got that solid foundation in terms of the people providing that service. So if Mike is taking some time, whether it's vacation or whatever, that you can fully trust. I mean, you probably, because it sounds like you've got some long-term people on your team, they probably are bought in. And yet, what else do we need to do to ensure that we're creating that space that as we all, I'll say, mature into our careers, that we're also going to be a great place for new people to come on board.
I have a question about triple win and succession planning. I think that was one of your blogs, or was mentioned on your website. And I'm curious what it is and if it fits into this kind of
Yes.
the ethos of this idea, right? Because if you want to make sure you have cash flow, right? You want to make sure that the company works, but at the same time, you want to make sure that your clients are still happy. And it sounds like that maybe this fits into the triple win. Am I on the right
Yes,
track?
absolutely. So I consider it the succession success formula, and it's communication plus engagement plus professional or leadership development equals a triple win. And that is a win for the owners of the business, founders, partners, principals, a win for the team, and a win for clients. Clients will know and have confidence that they're going to be well cared for, especially as founders or owners get closer to that, I'll say, kind of logical time horizon when people will typically start to think about that, because they will know people on the team, and happy, engaged people tend to provide wonderful client service, and you have greater confidence in that continuity, whether it's following internal succession of some kind or continuity following an M&A transaction, if that's what happens. But it's just, again, brings a focus to, there's got to be, and this is the way I'll put it, there's got to be value placed on that, just that communicating effectively with our people, engaging with them, and then being intentional about what kind of development needs to happen. Because you can have some people, and I don't know, Mike, you can tell me whether this is true for you. You can have people on your team that are mission critical. They're not aspiring maybe to being a partner in the firm or that kind of thing, or a financial advisor, but they're still critical to the team. And then you can have other people that, yeah, maybe they're aspiring to being a partner, or like most of the calls I've been getting over the last few months have been from those next gen professionals who thought they were recruited to become a partner, and there's just nothing happening or no conversations going. So it's just recognizing that not only does a leader need to be thinking about the care and feeding of clients, if you will, but it's really also, it's that care and feeding of the people that are the lifeblood of the business outside of that rainmaker or technical expert of that's usually embodied in the founder.
Laurie, you just kind of hit a nerve, because if you can picture this, a very senior assistant who wants to remain an assistant and a young person who aspires to be a partner but really doesn't bring the same dimensions to the table. And how do you work your way through that issue where one of them, who is ultimately qualified and capable, doesn't, but the other one who isn't qualified or capable does? I mean, how do you face a dilemma like that?
I think, it all starts with, wait for it, courageous conversations. And it's those courageous, candid conversations one-on-one with each person to confirm, like with the longer term person who really wants to be an assistant. And in my business, we had at least a few people like that. And you're grateful, because if everybody's ready for that next ring, then you'd have that constant turnover in those kind of really basic functions, right? So it's not a bad thing, but it's just recognizing that it does take more effort as the leader of the company to say, let me just affirm with her that she's good or he's good, and what kind of succession planning do we still need to do there? Doesn't mean you're bringing somebody in, but that you're setting yourself up for success and including that person in preparing for, it's kind of like the business continuity planning that's required for RIAs. It's getting that granular and having that person participate in that. But for the other person, it's having courageous conversations there too, to just say, there's an idea, how would you assess yourself relative to whatever criteria you might have in terms of what you would expect from a potential partner, and then share your assessment of where they are, kind of establish that agreement on what's the learning or development gap, and then come together and think about how can we intentionally start to bring you along in a way that is not disruptive to the business, communicates to that person that you care and that you're being thoughtful about their development and where they are. But it does start with those conversations. And that is something that I've helped clients with, is just being that kind of a partner to the leadership to assist with having some of those conversations and kind of mapping out development plans.
Hello, hello, hello. Quick reminder to check out justbuildwealth.co for all past episodes and the transcripts for the episodes. Also at justbuildwealth.co, you can find links to register for upcoming continuing education webinars. While you're there, pick up a copy of The False Hope of Global Diversification. And now back to our interview with Laurie Nichols. I want to segue slightly. I'm curious about succession planning in how it might. We're talking about like nurturing internal talent to take over, right? But I'm wondering if succession planning could also be discussing the possibility of a sale.
Absolutely.
Is that an equal kind of weighted scenario?
Yeah, because what ends up happening, and again, I'll use the phrase nowadays. Nowadays, valuations are such for a lot of firms that it's daunting. I'll use that. I'll say it that way. It can be daunting for potential successors to think about fully cashing out an owner or an ownership team. And so sometimes it will become a matter of, hey, our initial preferred outcome was an internal succession. It's not looking like it's going to work for these reasons. So we are going to now at least consider other options, in which case we still need that engaged, bought-in team. Now we're just expanding our vision to include who would those good partners be. And, there was a quote I came across. It was just, a panel discussion that I had watched that at its core, an M&A transaction is all about the psychology of change. Same thing for internal succession. So it's you as business owners, you're preparing for change. So how that change actually happens, internal or an external transaction, almost doesn't matter. You just have different participants in the whole process, right? But it does require being intentional up front. And I would say when it comes to an external transaction, that's where the game changes pretty dramatically in terms of taxing a lot of people's communication skills, because there's almost like a natural hesitancy around, like, if you're highly motivated to monetize your business, have a good financial outcome, there could be a hesitation around being fully candid with the potential buyer and entering into conversations about what's a good fit. What are maybe some challenges we've got here that are going on that would be important to know? Because after a deal is done, any unvoiced expectations or assumptions, they're going to be found out.
Yeah.
Because people's unmet expectations will create just this emotional weight after a transaction.
That's interesting. I'm curious in terms of, so say you are looking at an external transaction, right? Is it, I'm thinking about like the niche of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have some businesses that are just they do everything for everybody, right? Which can be good if you're massive, but if you're small, it might be a little bit hard to manage. Is it better to have a very specific niche when trying to find a suitor, as it were, or is it better to be a generalist? Any thoughts on that?
I don't know that I would say I tend to be more in the niche
Yeah.
orientation is better just in general. That said, when it comes to doing a transaction with an external buyer, almost what matters more is that you're able to articulate well what it is that attracted your clients to you.
Uh-huh.
So if it's not a niche, like say, we work with a lot of dentists or medical people or attorneys or, whomever that might be, but it's being able to articulate well, whatever that secret sauce is that you believe attracted your clients to you.
That's an interesting way to think about it, because it might not be the this is the a demographic, right? It might be just, we were speaking with somebody else a few weeks ago, and it was just the lifestyle, right? Oh, I like hiking, and I gel with hikers, and that's who we serve, right? Or we serve. I think it was the lifestyle element to it, because in many ways that helps you establish rapport much quicker, and you can have those better conversations in that way, rather than saying we only because there's a lot of different types of dentists out there.
Yeah, and so I think too, again, it's being, and this is a good practice for any RIA, partner, or anybody that's involved in an RIA that's focused on kind of that marketing and messaging and identifying the secret sauce, is being able to articulate it well internally and externally.
Yeah. So, Laurie, my experience is that when you're looking for successors, there's obviously compromises one has to make. One would be kind of their knowledge and competency toward the art or science. Another one would be their ambition, their commitment. How do you balance looking for those factors with, frankly, the speed of the decision? You got to get something done. The years go by, and you keep not accepting different people because of some element where you don't think they're good enough. How do you balance between the speed and the competency, I guess is what I'd say.
First of all, don't wait until your hair's on fire, if possible, because it does add to, and I'm going to put it this way, that emotional layer of anxiety. So if you're truly feeling a sense of urgency, it's going to be trickier, because it's unlikely that you're going to find, and well, let me rephrase this. Oftentimes I see founders that are unconsciously, you could tell I'm being careful about how I word this, but they're unconsciously looking for a mini me. And so that's one of the things, is that you have to let go of that vision of a mini me being your ideal candidate. And it's really stepping to think back and almost like put yourself in the shoes of a third party buyer and having a due diligence mindset combined with that heart of, hey, yeah, I built this. This is my firm. These are my people. These clients are my people, that kind of thing. But starting to think about what is the win from my client's perspective? What kind of person would that need to be? It's not going to be me in a younger form. And yet, because me, I know a little bit about your background, but a lot of firms, they're started by people, maybe they are in their 30s or their 40s. Now it's 20, 30 years later. Well, that 30-year-old that bootstrapped this business, we don't need a 30-year-old capable of bootstrapping. We need somebody probably a little more seasoned that can step into the shoes I actually wear now. And one of them may in fact be that, rainmaker, that kind of thing. But if it's now a larger, more complicated organization, it may be two people and not just one. It may be this person really fills this part of the role that I play now. This person will fill this other part of the role. And the beauty of that is you diversify in terms of what those people are taking on operationally speaking, but then you also diversify in terms of the financial load if they're going to be buying in or participating in some way, whether it's, I'll put it this way, a down payment for lack of a better way to put it. But it's just starting to think about, I'm not going to have a mini me, but I understand my clients well enough. And it goes back to that fit question. So there's the client piece. What's the win in it for the clients? But it's also thinking about what's the win in it for our team. So what kind of person needs to be leading as I start to reduce my time or get ready to fully step out? So it's not an easy, super straightforward response, Mike, but it is, I would say the place to start is to just kind of zoom out a little bit to see things with a wider lens and get super clear on the qualities of the person that you'd want to be partners with even in the short run. And what skills do you want them to bring to the table in addition to business development?
It sounds like you need to kind of do a self-inventory, figure out like, what are my skills, knowledge, things like that, right? It's not just one person that you're looking for. Maybe it's multiple people.
And it could be, here's the way I've got a couple clients where I put it in terms of you wear a lot of shoes, you have many pairs of shoes in your closet, and you're able to easily step in and out of those. And it's not that my clients are truly unicorns themselves, but almost it seems like it, because they are able to do all these things so well. You may not find somebody to embody all of the roles you play, but we do need to make sure that whether they are owners or whether they are just a part of your team, we need to make sure that you too are really clear that you're wearing these different, whether it's shoes or hats or, you're playing all these parts, and each one of these parts needs to be filled.
And think of the book and the movie Moneyball on that one, but I don't want to go down that path further. So there's a classic Dwight Eisenhower quote, though I do want to cover, Laurie, which involves the planning part of the term succession planning. And the quote is, the importance isn't the plan, the importance is the planning. Mm-hmm. Does that kind of ring true in this process also?
Yeah, because if you think about it, the planning is the engagement, it's the communication, it's the making, and I'm using that word intentionally, making the time for thinking more deeply about what it is that you want and why relative to succession planning. It's the who do I need to have courageous conversations with. All of that happens over time. That is part of the planning. And it's knowing that the plan itself, just like any strategic plan, a business plan, can be kind of a living document that gets fine-tuned. But the planning, and in my view, yes, you get evaluation. Yes, you start to talk to whoever your tax professionals are about, different scenarios and what those kind of implications could be. But it's the people engagement piece that is really going to make a difference in terms of it's your personal self-reflection plus that people engagement piece that's really going to set yourself up for having a good outcome.
So my expectation is that people don't like to create a succession plan, but they like to have had one created, right? Rather, they'd like people don't like to run a marathon; they like to finish running a marathon because it's a lot easier to finish than it is to get past mile 3 and 4 and 5 and 25. So is there a simple way to just actually get started creating a succession plan? What's the jump start?
The jump start, from my view, is wait for it. It's very simple, but not easy. It's as the founder or owner, if you're the one that is going to be first, like if you've got partners and you're going to be the one that's going to be first to exit, it's in my view, it's non-negotiable. You've got to calendar the time to sit down for some personal reflection so that you start to think about what's most important to me in this whole process. What are my essential outcomes? And that can include the financial pieces of it, but it's really making the time to go through that self-reflection. And as a part of that, identifying who are the true stakeholders in me and the clients and our team having a good outcome. And that could be a combination of your spouse, your, long-term 20-year assistant. That could be your next generation professionals if you've got some on your team. It could be, your critical COIs, centers of influence, or people that typically refer to you. But it's just really being clear about who are those stakeholders, and it's engaging with them too, to start to plant the seeds of, it's not saying I'm not out the door today, but it's important that we plan, and what insights might they have to share. And this is the kind of stuff that I help clients with too, is really taking on that stakeholder surveying exercise. But it's invaluable to see where everybody else is in relation to just getting the ball rolling, because you might be surprised at how often you'll hear from people, well, I wondered when we were going to start, or when you were going to start talking about that, or even key clients, because I've worked with people, and in my old firm too, we had some anchor clients that we needed to make sure that they were going to be on board when we were doing our management buyout. And again, years later with doing the eventual full sale of the company.
So I imagine this is the living document, right? It's not a one and done thing. How often should it be revisited? Because I also think there's a way to overdo it, right? You can't be doing it every single year, or maybe, I don't know, what's the usual cadence?
I would say, it's kind of like, and I'm a big believer in, going back to even the Covey quadrants, where quadrant 2 is not important or not urgent, but important. And so strategic planning in general, so often RIAs don't really make time for it. It's just get more clients and get clients, not really a strategic plan. And so if you think about a strategic plan that thinks about what are our staffing needs, what are our technology needs, it's not that different. So it's kind of like at minimum annually, it's just at minimum, and it would kind of break my heart if that's all it is, but it's those regular check-ins with your stakeholders as years go by. And every time there's a human being added to the mix or removed from the mix, that's a good time to revisit too. What does that do not only to our strategic plan, but what does that do to our succession plan?
Interesting. And is there any specific like company information or documentation that needs to be prepared when when you want to start planning, or are there any like actual things you got to bring to the table to make sure that it's a completed plan?
Um, Let me say this first. It's not so much that you need to be able to say it's a completed plan, but having a value, like a professional valuation done, can be sobering, inspiring, and it can help to really get a sense of what's at stake.
Yeah.
And especially if you're wanting to uh, create enthusiastic potential future partners, having a sense of, yeah, for yourself too, it's like, what I have built is valuable, financially speaking. And so that's the first thing I think is to just have that professional valuation done. And then second is I think of it as a stakeholder map. So it's just a clear, it could be a simple spreadsheet, but it's just having some documented tool that identifies here are the stakeholders and why they're stakeholders, what matters to them, and why it's important to me that these people remain stakeholders. And so that you've got some kind of a visual to say these are the people involved. And then I think the kind of the third piece of that answer would be at least an initial conversation with your either your business attorney, like if you've got a shareholder agreement or that kind of thing. If you're a sole owner, I would be talking to a business attorney about what would a shareholder agreement need to look like if I was going to go try to do an internal succession. So you just start to think about the people part, the legal part, and the financial part.
It's funny when you were mentioning the evaluation can be sobering. I thought of two things. The first thing is I was watching I wasn't watching it, but I saw a snip from Antique Roadshow, and this guy brought in like a really valuable Rolex, and it valued it he's like, oh, one of these could value at $400,000, and the guy almost falls over because he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, but this was a very special one, so this would be about $700,000, and he was amazed. But I feel like if your business is your business, right? You didn't inherit it from somebody else, then it's probably not as a surprise, or it probably shouldn't be as much of a surprise as it could be. Do people are they often surprised when they see the valuation, or is it maybe they expect it to be a certain level?
I'll use nowadays again.
Yeah.
Nowadays, well, this is probably moderating a bit just with how much interest rates have been rising and some of those factors impacting things. But it's almost more of like the expectation meter has gone to the other direction. And there are very high expectations around what the valuation is going to be. And what I find too is that somebody will get a valuation, and then as the years tick by, they've got that line, that's like a line item in their mind about what the value of their firm is. And in reality, any number of things can impact that valuation over time. And so it's important to just get it again, because you have to, you don't have to, but don't think about this at your peril. But I would say you have to be looking at it like, even though it's my blood, sweat, and tears and deep emotional commitment that built this thing, whether it's an internal buyer or an external buyer, it's an investment. They are making an investment. It's your baby, but it's recognizing you're not going to get baby points or a baby premium.
Yeah.
It's
not a charity transaction. They're like buying it for a specific reason.
Yes. And it's an investment. And especially, I would say, in our industry, chances are, especially if it's a third party buyer, they're going to be smart. They're going to be educated about where valuations are at, all that kind of stuff. If it's an internal buyer, like I've got a client right now where these are the next gen are CFAs. What do CFAs do? They're chartered financial analysts. Yep. What do? They evaluate
look at the
investments
numbers
all day.
Yeah.
And so now you're talking about a very personal investment for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's personal for them and it's financial. It's tricky. And that's kind of where I bring my heart into this coaching process, which is to help everybody kind of balance that, what can be kind of an anxious, just kind of almost like a relational crossroads, especially for an internal transaction, to let's get our arms around, what our needs are financially, but also what our needs are as people as you go through this thing, and try to find that sweet spot for valuation and accomplishing the ultimate goal, which is to transition the business.
So let's shift the spotlight to you, Laurie. I was thinking about this within the era of kind of the individual financial stuff. You have both transactional people and relationship people. Yours bridges both, but I would say that whereas an accountant and a financial advisor are an ongoing relationship, an estate planning attorney, as good of a relationship as they might have with someone, they're a transaction. There, every 5-7 years, there's a transaction. I would kind of fit you in the same category as the estate planning attorney. And so my question becomes, what's the ideal number of clients for you? You're obviously in a position where you can pick and choose those kinds of things. What are you looking for client-wise?
So from my perspective, my mission is really about having a great impact on great people going through and preparing for times of great change. And as such, I am seeking more, I'm not seeking hundreds of small engagements where it's just me doing one-on-one coaching with, say, a leader. I could do that kind of thing. But really, it's working with, usually it's like 3 to 5 firms at a time. And it can be assisting with that, those kickoff what I call the discovery engagements, which is getting the ball rolling. Or it can be, it's the coaching and facilitation with business partners before they even get to the planning, to ensure that they're fully on the same page. And but again, it's like those 3 to 5 engagements at a time. And I've started the last few years sprinkling in offsites, because for some people that can be a great way to jumpstart things. Is let's just go offsite, ideally someplace fabulous. Last year, it's like we had Palm Springs, there was Scottsdale, and coming from Seattle, it was all good.
Yeah.
but it's getting people offsite, because as for RIAs, everything's so focused on client service, business development. It can be really tough even with things being more virtual these days, it can be really tough to just carve out the time and focus on this more strategic thinking, creating real connection, and create the space without people having an eye on their email inbox or their cell phones, and just really being unplugged to get serious about focusing on that. And I try to make it fun for people too, but also just really bringing that framework for these conversations so that it's effective and they do have some confidence. The ball is actually rolling now, because you can pivot, to your point earlier, does the plan stay static? No. But if it never gets rolling, that's about as static as you get, right? So it's really supporting that effort, and because I really think it's so important to have that deeper connection with people while we're doing the work. I typically limit myself to, like I said, like 3 to 5 companies at a time, and that depends on the number of people that are engaged in the process. So,
and you have actually answered this question in different ways before in the conversation, but let me kind of bring it to a point. When should people come to you? What's the trigger where they should get Laurie on the phone and start talking to you?
Here's the way it's kind of like what I've seen and what I'd like to see even more of. What I've seen, it's typically when business partners are either one or all are becoming painfully aware that they're not on the same page. Or I get called quite often by those that I think of as the next gen professionals, where they are recognizing that time is marching on and they're getting anxious that they're not going to have a plan in place, and they want support for just teeing up that conversation. I also see outreach when M&A advisors have a client, or buyers and sellers, where it's kind of a struggle, and they want support for assessing the situation, getting people on the same page. And then a third thing would be buyers who know that I think of it this way, they are consciously incompetent around how to have those effective conversations with potential sellers, so that they know they're talking with people that would be a good fit. And so if somebody's wanting to, I'll say, kind of supplement their organic growth by acquiring other practices, I can be a great partner in assessing fit and facilitating better conversations, so that those, I talked early in our conversation about the M&A and how it's the psychology of change, mm-hmm. and how all the rough water gets stirred up because of unmet expectations. And so that's really kind of my superpower is, let's get assumptions out on the table, so out loud, and let's get expectations put out on the table too, because there's no shame in that game if you've got these expectations, but it will be painful and could end up essentially sabotaging the transaction after the fact, or after it's been executed, which is financially costly. It's costly in terms of client relationships, but it's not being afraid to have candid communication. And I sense that with a lot of investment advisory firms, especially the larger they get, conflict avoidance is a river that runs through them. And that's the discomfort with being candid, even between shareholders and business partners. There's a lot of assumptions going on about what people think, what people want. And so starting early is good, and having those conversations, but also, bringing in support so that you're not trying to become experts in something that, or masters at something that is truly a skill
Yep.
that can be gained.
Interesting. Well, last few minutes, I want to direct to the final 4 questions. And these are questions we ask everybody to get an idea of the inside workings, right? So the first one is the top fiction, nonfiction books that you've, or maybe references or media that has guided your thinking recently. Are there any things you can point to?
Yeah, so I'm a new and very huge fan of the Table Group and Patrick Lencioni and his latest kind of whole thing that he's brought into everybody's awareness around the 6 types of working genius. So if you even Google working genius or 6 types working genius, it'll pop up. And I'm starting to use this assessment with my clients and absolutely love it.
Usually I hear that of the things people reference. This is brand new. Love this.
It is pretty darn new, but I think of him as kind of the guru around teams, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and
sure.
all of that is stuff that especially when I'm doing those offsites and that, we'll start with a lot of that. But yeah, so they've started a new podcast that's supporting this too. So it's an easy read. So if you're a RIA firm founder or member of a leadership team, I think you'll find it insightful.
It's called The Table Group.
The Table Group is the name of his consulting company,
okay.
and it's Patrick Lencioni is the author, and I think of as the guru.
Okay, that's cool. Next one, the tools that you use that you love, and for these we've heard LinkedIn's great, Calendly, Asana, things like that. Anything that sticks out that makes your work more efficient or effective?
Oh gosh, when I think of tools, I have a virtual assistant that's really helped with setting up some proprietary tools that kind of keep me on top of things.
Yeah.
My primary tool for visibility has been just LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And sharing blog posts and that kind of thing. So I would say I've relied more on human tools than technology. But with clients, I use assessments like the emotional intelligence assessments, strengths finders,
Yeah.
a lot of those kinds of things that I see as tools as well.
Got it. Cool. Your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
I love to cook, but I also love making reservations. And so I love them both pretty equally, actually. And so trying new restaurants, there's something about a great little restaurant with fantastic ambiance and a wine list and small plates. I'm happy.
Are there good tapas places in Seattle?
There are, there's a place called Ricolto that's got an Italian vibe, and it's small plates of just amazing pastas. And it's Seattle, so there's usually some kind of raw fish, small plate too that they do amazingly well. And it's kind of dimly lit. It only seats 25, 30 people. Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
What do you cook at home? What's your go-to delicious dinner?
More and more, it has been experimenting with salmon, fresh salmon, and just really simple but delicious preparations of salmon. I love making a Portuguese. Oh gosh, it's a stew that's got andouille sausage and white beans and clams or mussels. Kind of that kind of stuff. Anything with my Dutch oven.
That sounds great. It's about 3 p.m. here, so I'm right in the middle between lunch and dinner, but I can have a snack.
There you go.
How do people find you?
I think the best place to start is find me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And I spell Laurie, Laurie. So it's Laurie Nichols, or simply laurienichols.com online. So my website could be helpful. There's a contact form there, but connect with me on LinkedIn. And, if it's somebody that's looking for a sounding board on next steps, let's get a time on the calendar.
Perfect. Laurie Nichols, thank you for coming on Just Build Wealth. Talked about courageous conversations, talked about self-inventory, a due diligence mindset. This is really, really enlightening.
Thank you. And make a reservation.
Make it. Well done. That was great. All right. Thanks so much, Laurie. I appreciate the time.
Thanks again, Laurie. That was very nice.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Just Build. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Just Build Wealth podcast. You can find the show notes for ideas referenced in this show at justbuildwealth.co/Laurie, Laurie. Also at justbuildwealth.co, you can sign up for the newsletter and get notified of podcasts and continuing education webinars and audiobooks. This podcast is free to listen to, but if you share, we can create more content and continue having excellent conversations. So, as my favorite podcast host, Jordan Harbinger, says, we rise by lifting others. Rate this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Share and give us feedback because we want to continue making great content. Thanks so much.